They always called it my boring government desk job. They laughed when I told them they could not touch a thing. Then, the night I finally worked from my old bedroom, my mother said the words that would detonate everything. She told me to relax because they were just basic work files. By the time she realized what she had actually opened, black SUVs were already swarming the driveway, and my family was learning exactly what classified costs. My name is Noelle Harmon, and at 34 years old, I have mastered the art of being the least interesting person in the room. It is a survival mechanism. When people ask what I do, I tell them I work in data processing for the government. I tell them it is a lot of spreadsheets and staring at screens until my eyes burn. I make it sound so tedious that their eyes glaze over before I even finish the sentence. That is the point. If they are bored, they stop asking questions. If they stop asking questions, I do not have to lie. The truth is that I am a senior threat integration analyst for the National Security Integrity Directorate, or the NSID. It is not James Bond, and it is certainly not boring. My job is to take the millions of fragmented data points that float through the intelligence community financial transfers, travel logs, encrypted chatter, purchasing patterns, and stitch them together into a coherent picture of imminent danger. I look for the needle in the stack of needles. I live in a world of high-stakes pattern recognition, where a missed decimal point in a wire transfer could mean a chemical plant goes dark 3 weeks later. But to the people waiting for me in Bracken Ridge, Maryland, I am just Noelle, difficult Noelle, secretive Noelle, the daughter who thinks she is too good to tell her own mother what she actually does for a living. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel as the highway stretched out before me. I had promised myself I would stay for exactly 48 hours. It was my father's retirement party. Frank Harmon was finally stepping down from his mid-level management role at a logistics firm, a job he had leveraged into a personality trait for 40 years. He was a man who cared deeply about appearances, about the lawn being manicured to the millimeter, and about his children reflecting his own perceived greatness. Then there was my mother, Diane. If my father was the general, she was the head of intelligence. She did not just want to know what you were doing. She wanted to know what you were thinking while you did it. She viewed privacy as a personal insult. To Diane Harmon, a locked door was not a boundary. It was a challenge. I pulled into the driveway of the house I grew up in. It was a sprawling, colonial-style build that looked perfect from the street. The shutters were freshly painted a tasteful navy blue. The hydrangeas were blooming in exact, spherical clusters. It was the kind of house that screamed stability. It was a lie, of course. Inside that house, silence was weaponized, and affection was transactional. I had barely cut the engine when the front door swung open. Diane stood there, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She watched me get out of the car, her eyes scanning me from my shoes to my hair. She was looking for flaws. She was looking for ammunition. "You look tired." "Noelle," she said instead of hello. Her voice was light, but the implication was heavy. It meant I looked old. It meant I was not taking care of myself. It meant I was failing at being a woman in the way she defined it. "Hello?" "Mom," I said, reaching into the back seat for my bag. I grabbed the garment bag with my dress for the party and my laptop case. I never went anywhere without the laptop case. It was biometric locked, encrypted, and frankly, worth more than the car I was driving. "Is that the work computer?" she asked, her eyes narrowing at the black case. "I thought you said you were taking the weekend off." I lied. "I just cannot leave it in the car." "Liability," she scoffed, turning back toward the house. "You act like you carry the nuclear codes." "Honestly, Noelle, it is just data entry. You do not have to be so dramatic about it." I followed her inside, the familiar scent of lemon polish and pot roast hitting me like a physical blow. It was the smell of my childhood. It smelled like obligation. Inside, the hierarchy was already established. Brielle was in the kitchen, arranging hors d'oeuvres on a silver platter. My sister, the doctor, the pediatrician who saved babies and married a lawyer and produced 2 perfect grandchildren who were currently at a sleepover so the adults could celebrate. Brielle looked up and smiled. That perfect, camera-ready smile that made me feel like I had dirt under my fingernails. "You made it," Brielle said. "We were taking bets on whether you would have a sudden work emergency." "I do not have work emergencies," I said, setting my bag down by the stairs. "I have deadlines." "Same thing." Logan's voice boomed from the living room. My brother walked in, holding a glass of scotch that looked too large for his hand. Logan was 2 years older than me and 10 years behind in maturity. He was wearing a suit that cost $3,000, but he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Logan was an entrepreneur, which in our family meant he was constantly borrowing money from our parents to fund ventures that inevitably collapsed 6 months later. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, squeezing a little too hard. "Good to see you." "Sis," the mystery woman returns. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. I knew that smell. I smelled it on assets who were about to be burned. I smelled it on targets who knew the walls were closing in. Logan was smiling, but the corners of his eyes were tight. I moved my shoulder, dislodging his hand. "Good to see you, Logan. How is the consulting firm?" His smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he plastered it back on. "Booming. Absolutely booming. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that later. Got some big things in the pipeline. Government contracts. Real heavy hitter stuff." I felt a cold prickle at the base of my neck. This was it. This was why he was so eager to see me. "We can talk later," Diane interrupted, clapping her hands. "Frank will be down in a minute. Noelle, put your things in your room. And please, try to look a little more alive. It is a celebration." I carried my bags up the stairs to my old bedroom. It had been preserved like a museum exhibit from 2005. The debate team trophies were still on the shelf. The bedspread was still the same floral pattern I had hated when I was 16. I placed my laptop case on the desk, the only piece of furniture I had actually liked, and checked the room. Old habits died hard. I checked the window latch, locked. I checked the closet, empty. I felt foolish doing it, but paranoia was a job requirement. I took the laptop out, set it up, and engaged the localized firewall. I was not planning to work, but if an alert came through, I needed to be ready. When I went back downstairs, the performance had begun. My father, Frank, was holding court in the living room. He was wearing his retirement watch, checking it every few minutes to make sure everyone noticed it. He hugged me, a stiff, formal embrace that felt more like a handshake. "Glad you could make time for us," he said. "I always make time." "Dad," he laughed, a dry sound. Sure you do. Just like you make time to tell us what is going on in your life. We had to hear from Aunt Carol that you moved apartments. Is that true?" "I moved 6 months ago," I said, keeping my voice even. "I sent you a card with the new address. Must have got lost in the mail," Diane said from the kitchen. "Or maybe you just thought you sent it. You are always so busy with your secret files." The sarcasm was thick enough to choke on. I walked into the kitchen to help Brielle, needing to be away from the interrogation. Logan followed me. He leaned against the counter, swirling his scotch. "So, Noelle," he started, lowering his voice. I was serious about that chat. "Not now." "Logan, no. Listen, it is not a big deal. I am bidding on a supply chain optimization project for the Department of Transportation. Huge contract. 7 figures. Good for you," I said, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. "The thing is," he continued, inching closer, "the bidding process is a black box. I just need to know who the decision makers are. You know people in D.C. You have access to the directories." I stopped chopping. I turned to look at him. "Logan, I work in threat integration. I do not have a Rolodex of procurement officers for the DOT. And even if I did, I could not give you names. That is illegal." He rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on. Illegal. You always hide behind the rules. I am not asking you to rig the bid. I just want a name, a point of contact, just a little nudge to make sure my proposal gets read." "I cannot help you," I said firmly. His face darkened. The charming brother mask slipped, revealing the desperate man beneath. "Mom and Dad put a lot of money into this for me. Noelle, if this does not land, it is going to be bad. You could help, You just choose not to because you want to be the righteous one. I am not being righteous. I am being employed. I am not losing my clearance so you can cut the line." He scoffed. "Your clearance? You act like you are vital to national security. You are a glorified clerk. Noel, just admit you do not want to help me." I walked away. I could not have this conversation. Not again. Dinner was an exercise in endurance. The conversation revolved around Brielle's children, Frank's golf plans, and a long, detailed story from Diane about a neighbor who had installed a fence that was 2 inches over the property line. They laughed, they drank wine, and every few minutes, their eyes would flick to me. It was not the warm gaze of family, it was a calculating look. They looked at me the way a thief looks at a safe. They have forgotten the combination to. They knew there was something valuable inside my connections, my salary, my perceived power, and they were frustrated that they could not get to it. Brielle made a joke about how I was probably analyzing the threat level of the mashed potatoes. Everyone laughed. I smiled, but my jaw was tight. After dinner, I helped clear the table. The tension in the house was palpable. Logan was sulking on the patio. Frank and Diane were whispering in the living room, their voices stopping abruptly whenever I came near. I needed water. I needed a moment of silence. It was 1 a.m. The house was finally quiet. I walked into the kitchen, the linoleum cool under my feet. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the sink, staring out at the dark backyard. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that Logan was just stressed, that Diane was just being Diane. I told myself that tomorrow would be better. We would have the party. I would smile. I would leave. And I would not come back for 6 months. I opened the silverware drawer to get a spoon. I pushed aside the ladle and the whisk, and then I stopped. My breath hitched in my throat. There, nestled in the back of the drawer, in the little plastic tray meant for corncob holders, was a key. It was a small, brass key with a piece of faded masking tape wrapped around the head. On the tape, in my father's blocky handwriting, was the word master. I stared at it, the water in my glass trembling. 3 years ago, when I first started working on classified material from home occasionally, I had demanded that my parents get rid of the master key. This house had old interior locks, simple privacy sets that could be opened with a generic pin. But the bedroom doors had deadbolts installed years ago during a renovation. The master key opened all of them. I had watched my father throw it into the trash compactor. I had watched him push the button. He had made a big show of it, telling me that my privacy was respected, that I was an adult, that they had no interest in snooping. "You are ridiculous." "Noel," he had said, "but if it makes you sleep better, it is gone." It was not gone. It was sitting right there. It was clean. It was accessible. It was not buried under junk. It was placed. I reached out and touched the cold metal. A chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This wasn't just a key. It was a statement. It meant that every time I had come home, every time I had locked my door to take a call or review a file, I had been operating under a false sense of security. They had lied. They had kept it. Why I thought of Logan's desperate eyes. I thought of Diane's questions about the laptop. I thought of the way they had looked at me during dinner, like I was a resource to be mined. I looked up from the drawer, staring into the darkness of the hallway. The house felt different now. It was not just a place of annoying family dynamics anymore. It was a hostile environment. I slowly closed the drawer, leaving the key exactly where it was. If I took it, they would know I knew. And right now, my only advantage was that they thought I was still their oblivious, boring daughter. I walked back up the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. I checked my door. It was locked. I checked my laptop. It was secure. But as I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, I knew one thing for certain. The black SUVs and the federal agents were not here yet. But the crime had already begun. My family had not just crossed a boundary. They had prepared to breach a perimeter. And I was the target. The morning sun that filtered through the kitchen blinds at 7 o'clock was deceptively cheerful. It was the kind of light that belonged in a detergent commercial. bright and sanitizing, promising that any mess could be wiped away with a single swipe of a paper towel. I stood at the granite island, my hands moving rhythmically as I sliced cucumbers for the afternoon salad. I was trying to be useful. I was trying to be present. I was trying to ignore the sensation that I was standing inside a bear trap that had not yet snapped shut. My sister, Brielle, was arranging deviled eggs on a ceramic platter shaped like a rooster. She had arrived 20 minutes ago, bringing with her a whirlwind of perfection and passive aggression. She looked at my laptop bag, which I had placed on a chair in the dining room, within my direct line of sight. It was heavy, black, and strictly utilitarian, clashing violently with the pastel aesthetics of my mother's home decor. "You know," Brielle said, dusting paprika over the eggs with the precision of a surgeon, "it is a little insulting. I did not stop slicing. What is that you bring that thing everywhere? You act like you are a spy in a bad movie. Like if you leave it alone for 5 minutes, the house is going to explode. It makes everyone uncomfortable." "Noelle." I put the knife down and looked at her. "It is not a prop. Brielle, it is a secure terminal. If I lose positive control of it, I lose my job, and potentially, I go to federal prison. It is not about making you uncomfortable. It is about federal statutes." Brielle laughed, a tinkling, dismissive sound that grated on my nerves. She turned to our mother, Diane, who was stirring a pot of marinara sauce on the stove. "Do you hear her? Mom, federal prison? She loves to make it sound so grand." Diane did not turn around. She just tapped the wooden spoon against the rim of the pot. "Let her have her secrets, Brielle. It is the only thing she has that we do not." The insult was soft, delivered with the casual ease of someone commenting on the weather. I picked up the knife again. The blade sliced through the cucumber with a wet crunch. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that the reason I had the laptop was because there were people in the world who wanted to poison water supplies and grid-hack hospitals. And my job was to stop them. But I said nothing. Silence was safer. By noon, the house was filling up. Aunts, uncles, and cousins from 3 counties away had descended upon Bracken Ridge to celebrate Frank Harmon. The air grew thick with the smell of roasting meat and expensive perfume. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, refilling wine glasses and dodging questions. I was in the hallway, carrying a stack of napkins, when I heard my name. I stopped. My mother was standing in the living room with Aunt Carol, her back to me. "She looks well," Carol said. "A little thin, maybe." Diane sighed. A long, suffering exhalation. "She is difficult. Carol. She always has been. She comes home, but she is never really here. She acts like she is better than us because she works in the city. She is so cold. I try to reach out, but it is like hugging a statue. I stood frozen, the napkins crushed in my grip. Difficult, cold, a statue. That was the narrative. They did not see the hours I worked. They did not see the isolation I endured to keep the clearance that paid my bills. They only saw a daughter who would not gossip, who would not overshare, and who would not bend. I swallowed the lump in my throat and walked past the doorway, making sure my heels clicked loud enough on the hardwood so they would know I had heard. I saw Diane's shoulders stiffen, but she did not turn around. I needed to escape. I retreated to my old bedroom, locking the door behind me. The room felt smaller than I remembered, or maybe the walls were just closing in. I set the laptop on the desk and went through the protocol. I engaged the biometric scanner, swiping my thumb and letting the retinal camera scan my eye. The screen flared to life, a stark black background with white text. I connected the portable VPN key, waiting for the handshake protocol to verify my encryption. This was my world. It was clean. It was binary. It made sense. The doorknob rattled. I froze. I had locked it. I knew I had locked it. "Open up. Noelle. It is Mom." I minimized the terminal window, blanking the screen, and walked to the door. When I opened it, Diane was standing there with a basket of laundry. She pushed past me before I could stop her, dumping the clothes on the bed. "Why is the door locked?" she asked. her voice sharp. I am working. Mom, I told you, I need privacy. She gestured around the room, her hands sweeping through the air. This is my house. Noelle, you do not get to lock me out of rooms in my own house. You act like you are on a military base. It is ridiculous. We are your family, not terrorist spies. It is protocol, I said, my voice tight. Please, just respect it. Do not come in here when the door is closed. And please, do not touch the desk. She rolled her eyes, picking up a stray sock from the floor. You and your rules, you drain the joy out of everything. She left, leaving the door wide open. I walked over and closed it, engaging the deadbolt again. My heart was hammering against my ribs. She did not understand. None of them understood. To them, classified was just a word used to make things sound important. They had no concept of the reality. I worked for 2 hours, clearing a backlog of low-level threat assessments just to keep my mind occupied. The noise from the party downstairs drifted up through the floorboards. Laughter, clinking glass, the low thrum of music. I felt entirely separate from it, a distinct species observing a habitat I no longer belonged to. At 5 p.m, hunger drove me downstairs. The party was winding down, transitioning from a formal gathering to a loose collection of people drinking too much on the patio. I found Logan leaning against the railing of the back porch, staring out at the expansive lawn. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the grass. He saw me and waved me over. He had loosened his tie, and his face was flushed with bourbon. Hey, he said, his words slightly slurring. The prodigal sister emerges. I stood next to him, keeping a safe distance. How are you holding up? Logan, he swirled the amber liquid in his glass. I am drowning. Noelle, that is the truth. I looked at him. It was rare for Logan to be honest. Usually, he was all bluster and sales pitches. Is it the business, I asked? He nodded. I leveraged everything on this Department of Transportation bid. Everything. If I do not get this contract, I am done. The house, the car, the private school for the kids, it all goes away. I felt a pang of sympathy. He was my brother. After all, I am sorry. Logan, that sounds incredibly stressful. He turned to me, his eyes intense and pleading. It is not just stressful. It is fatal. Unless you help me. I stiffened. We went over this. Logan, no, listen, he said, stepping closer. I am not asking you to change the bid. I am not asking you to hack the system. I just need to know the parameters. I need to know the weighting system. Do they prioritize cost or speed? Who is the final signatory? Is it the regional director or the Federal Oversight Committee? I took a step back. Logan, those are procurement integrity details. They are not public. If I tell you that, it is insider trading of information. It is a felony. He slammed his hand down on the wooden railing, making me jump. A felony who is going to know. It is a conversation between a brother and a sister on a porch. You are so obsessed with your precious rules that you would let your own brother go bankrupt. It is not about rules, Logan. It is about the law, and it is about my career. Your career. He spat the word out like it was poison. You think you are so special because you have that badge. You think you are better than us. You sit in your room with your locked door and your secret computer, looking down on everyone. I am not looking down on anyone. I am trying to protect you. If I give you that information and you use it, the audit trail will lead back to me, and then we both go down. He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You are useless. You know that Mom is right. You are just a cold, selfish bitch. The words hung in the air, vibrating between us. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw the entitlement. He believed he was owed this. He believed my job existed to serve his needs. I will pretend you did not say that, I said quietly, because you are drunk. I turned to walk away, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was tight, painful. I can make it worth your while, he hissed. I know Mom and Dad owe money too. I know they refinanced the house again last year. If I get this contract, I pay them off. I save the family. Noel, I can save everyone. I just need you to give me the basics. Just the basic files. I ripped my arm away from him. My skin burned where he had touched me. No, I said. He looked at me with pure hatred. Then get out of my face. I walked back into the kitchen, my hands shaking. The house felt suffocating. The air conditioning was humming, but I felt hot, feverish. I needed to leave. I needed to pack my bag and drive back to the city. Regardless of the promise I had made to stay for 48 hours, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A single, sharp vibration. I pulled it out. It was a secure text via the encrypted Signal application. The sender ID was simply Arden, Director Arden, my boss. The message was 3 lines long. Package inbound. Operation Glass Harbor. Update. Priority 1. Need assessment on new financial web within 3 hours. Confirm receipt. My stomach dropped. Operation Glass Harbor. It was a massive, multi-agency investigation into a syndicate moving dual-use technology components through shell companies in the Midwest. It was high-level, extremely volatile, and the data was radioactive. If Arden was sending files now, on a Saturday night, it meant something had broken. A cover had been blown, or a shipment had been intercepted. I looked up. Diane was in the living room, laughing at something my father had said. Brielle was scrolling on her phone on the sofa. They looked so normal, so safe. I had to work. I had no choice. I could not drive back to the city. The 3-hour deadline would expire before I even hit the Beltway. I had to do it here, in this house, in that room. I walked up the stairs, my legs feeling heavy. I entered my childhood bedroom and locked the door. I checked the window. I checked the closet. I sat down at the desk and woke the laptop. I typed in the confirmation code to Arden. Receipt confirmed. Standing by. The download bar appeared on the screen. Encrypted packet 4.2 gigabytes. I stared at the progress bar, watching the green line inch forward. Outside, the crickets were chirping. Downstairs, the dishwasher was running. It was a peaceful suburban night. But as I watched the data pour into my terminal, I felt a distinct, chilling sensation. The peace was fake. The safety was an illusion. I was bringing the most dangerous elements of my world into the one place where no one respected the danger. I thought of the master key in the kitchen drawer. I thought of Logan's desperation. I thought of Diane's resentment. I was not just working from home. I was working from behind enemy lines, and I had just authorized the transfer of the weapon they were all looking for. I took a deep breath and clicked open the first file. The screen filled with bank routing numbers and surveillance photos. I did not know it then, but the clock had not just started on the assignment. It had started on the end of my life as I knew it. The glow of the monitor was the only light in the room. It was stark, artificial, and unforgiving. I was 3 hours into the analysis of the packet Director Arden had sent, and my eyes felt like they were filled with sand. Operation Glass Harbor was not just a file name, it was a labyrinth. It was a sprawling network of shell companies, maritime shipping manifests, and blind trusts that stretched from a port in Odessa to a warehouse district in Newark. The specific task was to find the financial leak. We knew the syndicate was moving components for guidance systems, but the money trail had vanished into a fog of cryptocurrency mixers and offshore accounts. My job was to find the anomaly. I was looking for the one transaction that did not fit the pattern, the single digital fingerprint left on a window pane of clean glass. I cross-referenced the shipping logs with the transaction timestamps. The data was dense. We were talking about thousands of lines of code and ledger entries. Every time I thought I had a lead, the trail looped back on itself. It was frustrating. It was the kind of work that required absolute, hermetic concentration, but I was not in a hermetic seal. I was in a bedroom with floral wallpaper in a house that smelled of stale wine and resentment. I needed to see the data differently. Scrolling through spreadsheets was causing me to miss the lateral connections. I needed to lay it out. I needed to physically compare the shipping dates with the wire transfers side by side without toggling windows. I made a decision that every security protocol advised against, but every analyst eventually made in the heat of the moment. I reached into my bag and pulled out my portable printer. It was a small, thermal ink device I used for emergency briefings. I connected it to the secure terminal and selected the specific range of data I needed. Appendix C. It contained the raw transaction hashes and the unredacted names of the suspected intermediaries. I hit print. The device whirred, a low, rhythmic sound that seemed deafening in the quiet room. One by one, the sheet slid out, 12 pages. 12 pages of high-level classified intelligence that could compromise an 18-month federal investigation if they fell into the wrong hands. I picked them up, the paper still warm. I spread them out on the duvet cover of my childhood bed, treating the mattress like a war room table. I began to circle dates with a red grease pencil. There, it was subtle, but it was there. A recurrent payment of $4,500 that appeared exactly 48 hours before every major shipment docked. It was listed as consulting fees to a firm that did not exist in any public registry. It was the heartbeat of the operation. I felt the rush of adrenaline that always came with the breakthrough. I reached for my phone to draft the preliminary update to Arden. Knock, knock, knock. The sound shattered my concentration. I flinched, dropping the pencil. Noelle. It is Mom. Open up. I squeezed my eyes shut, taking a deep breath to steady my heart rate. I am busy. Mom, you have been in there for hours. Aunt Carol is leaving. She wants to say goodbye, and there is leftover cake. I looked at the classified documents spread over the bed. I looked at the encrypted terminal running a decryption algorithm on the screen. I cannot come out right now, I said, my voice sharp. Noelle, do not be rude. It will take 5 minutes. I stood up, gathering the papers frantically. I shoved them into a neat stack. I could not leave them on the bed. I could not leave them on the desk. I unlocked the door and opened it 3 inches. My mother was standing there, her face flushed with annoyance. She tried to peer over my shoulder, but I blocked the view with my body. I am in the middle of a crisis. Mom, I am not being rude. I am working. You are always working, she snapped. It is Saturday night. You are making everyone uncomfortable. Just come down for 5 minutes. I cannot, she huffed, crossing her arms. Fine, be that way, but do not expect us to save you a plate. I looked her dead in the eye. Listen to me very carefully. No one comes in this room. Do not open this door. Do not touch my bag. Do not touch the papers. Do not touch the computer. Do not even dust the furniture. Do not breathe the air in here. Do not come in. Do not. She recoiled slightly at the intensity of my tone. Then she laughed. A dry, bitter sound. You are hysterical, Noelle. You really are. It is just a bedroom. It is a workspace, I corrected, and it is off limits. I closed the door in her face and threw the deadbolt. I heard her footsteps retreat down the hall, heavy with judgment. I turned back to the room. I was shaking. This environment was toxic. It was impossible to maintain operational security when I was fighting a psychological war on the home front. I needed to secure the papers. I picked up the stack of 12 pages Appendix C. I walked over to my briefcase, which was sitting on the floor by the desk. It was a hard-shell ballistic case, designed to withstand fire and impact. I opened the main compartment, but it was full of my tech gear cables, hard drives, the backup battery. I opened the secondary compartment, a slim pocket in the lid meant for documents. I slid the 12 pages inside. They fit perfectly. My phone rang. It was the secure line. Arden. I grabbed the phone with my left hand, answering immediately. Harmon here. We have a timeline update. Arden's voice was clipped, distorted by the encryption. The shipment is moving faster than anticipated. We need that assessment now. I am working on it, I said, cradling the phone between my ear and shoulder. I found a recurring payment. $4,500. It matches the docking schedules. Good, Arden said. Verify the recipient. I need a name. I will have it in 20 minutes. I hung up. In my haste, I reached down to close the briefcase. I slammed the lid shut. I flipped the 2 heavy latches. Click, click. I heard both of them. I felt them engage. I turned back to the computer, my mind already racing through the next steps of the analysis. I did not look back at the bag. If I had, I might have noticed something. The left latch had clicked, but it had not fully seated. The metal hook had caught the edge of the fabric lining instead of the locking bar. It looked closed. It sounded closed, but it was hovering, held in place by friction and gravity, not by the mechanism. It was a millimeter of error. A millimeter that would cost me everything. I spent the next hour typing furiously. I isolated the recipient of the funds. It was a shell company registered in Delaware, but the IP address used to access the bank account traced back to a residential neighborhood in Maryland. My stomach turned. It was local. The threat was not just in Newark or Odessa. It was here. I needed a break. My brain was misfiring. I was making typos. I was rereading the same sentence 3 times. I needed oxygen. I needed to reset my cortisol levels before I finalized the report. I stood up and stretched. I would go for a run. Just 30 minutes, a quick loop around the neighborhood to clear my head, and then I would come back and finish the job. I checked the room. Laptop. I hit the keystroke to suspend the session. The screen went black, requiring a 20-character password and a biometric scan to wake up. Secure. Briefcase. Sitting on the floor. Closed. Latches down. Secure. Windows locked. Blinds drawn. Secure. I grabbed my running shoes and changed into leggings and a t-shirt. I put my phone in my armband. I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped into the hallway. I turned around and locked the deadbolt with my key. I tested the handle. It was solid. I put the key in the zippered pocket of my leggings. I patted it to make sure it was there. I went downstairs. The house was quieter now. The guests had left. My father was in the living room, watching the news. Logan was gone, presumably to nurse his ego and his hangover somewhere else. I walked through the kitchen to get a bottle of water. Diane was there, loading the dishwasher. She stopped when she saw me. Going somewhere, she asked. Just for a run. I said, I need to clear my head. She looked at my running clothes, then at the clock on the microwave. It is almost 9 o'clock. Noelle. It is dark. I run in the dark all the time. Mom, I will be back in 40 minutes. She wiped her hands on a towel. You are so restless. You cannot just sit with your family. You always have to be running away from something. I am running towards sanity. I thought, but I did not say it. I walked to the back door. As I reached for the handle, my father called out from the living room. Noelle. Come here a second, I sighed, and walked into the living room. Yes, Dad. He was holding his phone up. Come on. Just one picture. Your mother is upset we did not get a family photo with you. Everyone else is gone. Just you and us. Dad, I am sweaty. I am going for a run. I am not dressed for a photo. He lowered the phone, his face hardening. It is always something with you. Just one picture. Is that so hard? You are here for 2 days and you act like you are in prison. I am working. Dad, this is not a vacation. He waved his hand dismissively. Go on then. Run. Go run your little secret miles. I turned and walked out the back door, the cool night air hitting my face. I felt a wave of relief as I stepped onto the pavement. I started to jog, the rhythm of my feet hitting the asphalt, helping to organize the chaos in my mind. Left foot, right foot, $4,500. Left foot, right foot. Shell company, left foot, right foot. Maryland, IP address. I ran past the manicured lawns and the silent houses of Bracken Ridge. I pushed myself hard, letting the physical exertion burn away the frustration of the argument with my parents. I visualized the data map in my head, connecting the dots, refining the report I would write when I got back. I was a mile away when I stopped at a traffic light. I checked my pulse, 140 beats per minute. Good. I looked back in the direction of the house. It was hidden behind the trees. Safe and silent. I patted my pocket. The key was there. I felt secure. I felt in control. I did not know that back in the kitchen. The dishwasher had stopped running. I did not know that Diane Harmon was standing by the silverware drawer. She was not loading dishes anymore. She was staring at the small plastic tray in the back of the drawer. She reached in and her fingers closed around the cold brass of the master key. She looked at the ceiling, toward the spot where my room was located. She remembered my words, "Do not come in, do not touch." She remembered the way I had shut the door in her face. She remembered the way Aunt Carol had looked at her with pity. She remembered the feeling of being shut out of her own daughter's life. "It is my house," she whispered to the empty kitchen. "I have a right to know." She walked out of the kitchen and started up the stairs. She moved quietly, not because she thought she was a criminal, but because she felt entitled. She was not stealing, she was parenting. She was fixing the distance between us. She reached my door. She tried the handle, locked. She smiled, a small, tight smile of victory. She slid the master key into the lock. It turned with a smooth, well-oiled click. She pushed the door open. The room was dark, lit only by the standby light of the monitor. She flipped the light switch. She looked around. The bed was made. The desk was clear. The laptop was closed. She frowned. There was nothing to see. Just a boring, clean room. Then she saw the briefcase on the floor. She walked over to it. She hesitated for a moment, her hand hovering over the handle. She remembered my warning, "Do not touch my bag." But warnings were for children. She was the mother. She reached down and undid the right latch. Click. She reached for the left latch. It did not click. It just lifted. It had never been locked. She opened the lid. Inside, tucked into the pocket, were 12 pages of white paper. She pulled them out. She adjusted her reading glasses that were hanging on a chain around her neck. She started to read. She saw names. She saw dates. She saw numbers. She did not understand the context. She did not understand the codes. But she understood one thing. This was not data entry. This was not boring. This was power. And for the first time in years, she held it in her hands. My lungs were still burning when I reached the front porch. The run had been exactly what I needed. A 30-minute purge of cortisol and frustration that left my legs heavy but my mind sharp. I walked up the driveway, stretching my calves against the concrete steps, breathing in the cool night air. For the first time all weekend, I felt a sense of equilibrium. I had the data. I had the analysis. I just needed to go upstairs, type it up, send it to Director Arden, and I could survive the next 24 hours of family obligation with a clear conscience. I unlocked the front door quietly, trying not to disturb the peace. The house was silent, but it was a heavy silence, the kind that feels pregnant with static electricity. I wiped my shoes on the mat and headed straight for the stairs. I needed a shower, but work came first. I reached the top of the landing and turned toward my room. I stopped. My heart, which had just begun to slow down to a resting rhythm, slammed against my ribs with the force of a sledgehammer. The door to my bedroom was open. It was not wide open. It was ajar. A gap of maybe 3 inches, a slice of darkness cutting through the white paint of the doorframe. But that 3-inch gap was a catastrophe. I had locked that door. I had felt the bolt slide home. I had tested the handle. I did not run. Training took over. My body went cold, my movements becoming fluid and precise. I pushed the door open with my fingertips. The room was exactly as I had left it, with one devastating exception. The ballistic briefcase was sitting on the floor where I had left it, but the lid was thrown back. The secondary compartment, the one I had failed to latch properly, was gaping open like a hungry mouth. I walked over to it. I did not need to look inside to know the truth. But I looked anyway. Empty. The 12 pages of Appendix C were gone. I stood there for a second, my mind reeling. This was not a draft. This was not a diary. This was classified intelligence regarding an active federal investigation into illicit arms trafficking, and it was gone. I turned around and walked out of the room. I did not run down the stairs. I walked. My steps were slow, deliberate, and silent. I felt like I was descending into a nightmare, but I was wide awake. I reached the bottom of the stairs and looked into the living room. The The scene before me was so domestic, so normal, that it was almost grotesque. The overhead chandelier was dimmed to a warm, inviting glow. My father, Frank, was sitting in his leather recliner, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. My mother, Diane, was sitting on the sofa with a glass of wine. Logan was standing by the coffee table, and there, spread out across the polished oak surface of the coffee table, amidst the coasters and the bowl of potpourri, were my files. They had laid them out like a puzzle. They had separated the pages. Page 1 was next to a remote control. Page 4 was under a wine glass. Frank was holding page 7. He was reading it with a furrowed brow, moving his lips slightly as he deciphered the text. I stepped into the room. The floorboards creaked under my running shoes. They all looked up. There was no guilt in their eyes. There was no shame. There was only a smug, self-satisfied defiance. "You are back early," Diane said. She took a sip of her wine. I looked at the table. I looked at the papers. I looked at my father. "Don't," I said. My voice was a whisper, but it sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "Do not read another word." Frank lowered the paper, looking at me over the rim of his glasses. He chuckled, a dismissive sound. "Relax. Noelle, we are just trying to understand what keeps you so busy." I walked to the table. I moved with a mechanical stiffness. "Put them down, all of you. Step away from the table." Logan laughed. He was holding his phone. The camera lens was pointed at the documents. The flash went off. A blinding strobe of white light that burned an afterimage into my retina. "You were holding out on us." "Sis," Logan said. His voice was trembling with excitement. "This isn't data entry. This is the supply chain breakdown for the Glass Harbor project. Do you know who these names are?" I turned to him. "Logan, put the phone down. Delete that photo. Now." He ignored me. He swiped on his screen, zooming in on the image he had just taken. I recognized 3 of these shell companies. They are the same holding groups that are bidding on the DOT contract. You have the back-end financials right here. You have the leverage points. He looked at me, his eyes wide and manic. "This is gold. Noelle, this is absolute gold. With this, I can squeeze the broker. I can force them to underbid." I felt a wave of nausea. He was not just looking, he was using. He was weaponizing national intelligence for a suburban construction contract. "This is a felony," I said. I was vibrating. I could feel the tremors in my hands. "This is unauthorized access to classified material. This is espionage. You are committing a crime right now." Diane scoffed. "Oh, stop it. Espionage. You sound ridiculous. We are your family. You cannot commit espionage against your own family. You stole from my locked room," I said, turning to her. "You used the master key." Diane shrugged. "It is my house. I do not steal in my own house. I inspect. And frankly, Noelle, I am disappointed. You have had this kind of influence all along, and you let your brother suffer. You let us struggle while you sit on information that could change our lives." I looked at Frank. He was still holding the page. "Dad, please, give me the paper." Frank shook his head. He placed the paper back on the table, smoothing it out with his hand. "You have become a very cold woman. Noelle, we raised you to help family. This." He tapped the document. "This is just business. It is just paper." Just then, the front door opened. Brielle walked in, carrying a tray of leftover desserts she had taken to her car. She stopped in the archway. Sensing the tension, she looked at me, standing in my sweaty running clothes, shaking with rage. She looked at our parents, calm and defiant. "What is going on?" Brielle asked. "Why does Noelle look like she is about to throw up?" "She is being dramatic," Diane said. "We just looked at her work files. The ones she said were so boring. Turns out, she lied." Brielle walked over to the table and glanced at the papers. "Oh, God. Is this what the fuss is about? It looks like tax returns." She looked at me, rolling her eyes. "Seriously, Noelle, you are acting like someone is dying. It is just paperwork." I ignored her. My eyes were locked on Logan. He was tapping furiously on his screen. "Logan," I said, stepping toward him, "do not send that." He looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. Too late. He turned the screen toward me. It was a text message thread. The recipient was listed only as contact, private, in the chat window. There was a blue bubble. It was the photo of page 7, the page with the names of the shell companies and the routing numbers. Below the image, a tiny gray word appeared, delivered. My world stopped. The air left the room. It was done. The breach was no longer contained. It had left the house. It had traveled through the cellular network, bouncing off towers, landing on a server somewhere, and arriving on a device that belonged to God knows whom. I stared at the word, delivered. Something inside me broke. It was the tether that bound me to them, the cord of obligation, of guilt, of daughterly duty. It snapped. I was no longer Noelle Harmon, the difficult daughter. I was Senior Analyst Harmon, NSID. And I was standing in a compromised location. I took a step back. I pulled my phone from my armband. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. I unlocked the screen and opened the emergency dialer. I entered a 6-digit code that I had memorized on my first day at the academy. "Who are you calling?" Diane asked, her voice mocking. "The police." "Go ahead. Tell them your mother looked at your homework." I did not answer her. I pressed the call button and held the phone to my ear. 1 ring, 2 rings. NSID, Emergency Operations Center, identify. A voice, mechanical and efficient, spoke in my ear. "Agent Harmon, ID number 74 Alpha Zulu 9. I am declaring a code red." The room went quiet. They were watching me. They did not understand the words, but they understood the tone. It was a tone they had never heard from me. It was the voice of a stranger. "Go ahead. Agent Harmon, I am at a remote location. Residence, Sector 4. I have a confirmed compromise of top-secret material. Operation Glass Harbor documents have been accessed by unauthorized civilians." Logan laughed nervously. "Unauthorized civilians? Jesus. Noelle, you are insane," I continued, staring straight through him. Physical copies were removed from a secure container. Documents have been photographed. I paused, taking a breath that felt like inhaling ice. Photographs have been transmitted via unsecure cellular network to an unknown third party. I have a data exfiltration event in progress. Copy that. Agent Harmon, containment teams are mobilizing. "What is the status of the subjects?" "Subjects are hostile," I said. "They are in possession of the physical assets. They are refusing to surrender control." Diane stood up. "Hostile. Who are you calling hostile?" "I am your mother." "ETA is 4 minutes," the voice said. "Do not engage. Secure yourself." I lowered the phone. I did not hang up. I left the line open. I looked at them. They were staring at me with a mixture of confusion and anger. They still did not get it. They thought I was playing a game. They thought this was another one of my dramatic episodes that they could talk their way out of. "You need to stop this," Frank said, his face turning red. "Hang up that phone. You are embarrassing this family." I walked backward toward the kitchen. I needed to put distance between myself and the evidence. "It is over." "Dad," I said, "it is out of my hands." Brielle looked at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not for herself, but for me. She thought I was having a mental breakdown. "Noelle, please, just sit down. We can talk about this. There is nothing to talk about." I said. Diane stepped forward, her hands on her hips. "You think you can scare us? You think anyone is going to believe you? You are a low-level clerk who is throwing a tantrum because we caught you in a lie. Call whoever you want. Let them come. I will tell them exactly what kind of ungrateful daughter you are." She was shouting now, her voice rising in a crescendo of indignation. I stood by the kitchen island, gripping the cold granite. I looked at the digital clock on the oven. 3 minutes had passed. Diane opened her mouth to yell again, to tell me how I was ruining the night, how I was selfish, how I was broken, but the words never came out. From the street outside, a sound cut through the night. It was not the gentle hum of suburban traffic. It was the screech of tires. Not one car, many. The sound was violent. It was the sound of heavy vehicles braking hard, rubber tearing against asphalt. It was the sound of absolute authority arriving at high speed. Then came the slam of car doors. 1, 2, 4, 6, heavy boots hitting the pavement, a chaotic, rhythmic thrumming of footsteps running toward the house. Logan walked to the window. He pulled back the curtain. His face went white. The color drained from his skin so fast, it looked like he had been struck by lightning. "What is it?" Frank asked. Logan turned around. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. He looked at me, and the arrogance was gone. In its place was sheer, unadulterated terror. "Why are there so many?" Logan whispered. Then the lights came. Blue and red strobes flashed through the front window, painting the living room in a chaotic, spinning disco of warning lights. The comfortable warmth of the room was obliterated, replaced by the harsh, pulsing glare of emergency response. A voice, amplified by a megaphone, boomed from the front yard, shaking the glass in the frames. "This is federal agents, occupants of the house. Stay where you are. Open the front door immediately." Diane froze. Her glass of wine slipped from her fingers. It hit the carpet with a dull thud, a red stain spreading outward like blood. I looked at my mother. "I told you," I said softly. "I told you not to touch it." I turned my back on them and placed my hands on my head, interlacing my fingers, waiting for the door to be kicked in. The red wine stain on the beige carpet was the only thing moving in the room. It spread slowly, a dark, jagged island expanding into a sea of wool loops. I watched it with a detached fascination. It was a ruinous stain. It would never come out. Diane would have to replace the entire carpet, or perhaps rearrange the furniture to hide it. But then again, after tonight, the arrangement of the furniture would be the least of her problems. Outside, the world had dissolved into a chaotic strobe of blue and red. The light cut through the sheer curtains, slashing across the walls. The family portraits, and the terrified faces of my parents. The sound of engines idling was a low, menacing growl that vibrated against the window panes. Logan was still standing by the window, his hand gripping the fabric of the drapes. He looked like a child who had woken up in the middle of a nightmare. He turned to me, his face the color of old ash. "Why are there so many?" he whispered. His voice cracked. "Noelle, there are vans. Why are there vans?" He did not wait for an answer. He looked back out, his eyes widening. "They are in the bushes," he said. "They are surrounding the perimeter." Then came the voice. It did not sound like a human voice. It was mechanically amplified, stripped of all empathy, booming from a speaker that was designed to override panic and enforce compliance. "Federal agents, we have the perimeter secured. Open the front door with your hands visible. Failure to comply will be met with force." The silence that followed in the living room was absolute. It was a vacuum. Diane looked at me. Her mouth opened, but no words came out at first. She looked at the front door, then back at me. Her eyes were wide, wet, and utterly bewildered. "Noelle," she stammered. Her voice was high and thin. "Noelle, stop this. Tell them to go away. Tell them it is a mistake." I did not move. I did not blink. "It is not a mistake," I said. Frank stood up from his chair. His knees popped. He looked indignant. The lord of the manor whose dinner had been interrupted. "This is harassment," he barked, though his voice shook. "I am going to call the police. You cannot just swarm a private residence like this." He reached for his phone on the side table. "Do not touch that phone." "Dad," I said. He ignored me. He grabbed the device. The front door did not open. It did not creak. It did not invite. It exploded inward. It was a controlled breach, executed with a battering ram that hit the lock mechanism with thousands of pounds of force. Wood splintered with a sound like a gunshot. The door swung back and slammed into the wall, the knob punching a hole through the drywall, and then they were inside. They moved like water, flowing into the room in a stream of black tactical gear and ballistic helmets. There were 6 of them in the initial entry team, They did not run. They advanced. It was a speed born of muscle memory and thousands of hours of kill-house drills. Their boots thudded heavily on the hardwood floor of the foyer before transitioning to the silent thumping on the carpet. "Hands, show me your hands." The shout was guttural, synchronized. Frank dropped his phone. It clattered onto the coffee table. Sliding next to the classified documents, he threw his hands up, stumbling back against the bookshelf. Logan was backed into the corner by the window. His hands raised so high they were touching the crown molding. He was shaking violently. Diane screamed. It was a short, sharp sound, cut off as a laser sight swept across her chest. Clear left, clear right, secure the hallway. The commands were barked out, clipped and precise. 2 agents swept past the living room, heading for the kitchen and the back door. 2 more moved up the stairs, their weapons raised, clearing the second floor. The lead agent, a man whose face was hidden behind a ballistic visor and a balaclava, stepped into the center of the living room. He held a carbine tight against his chest, the barrel pointed at the floor but ready to snap up in a millisecond. "Identify," he shouted. I slowly unclasped my hands from behind my head and held them out, palms open, chest high. I did not flinch. I did not tremble. "Agent Noel Harmon," I said. My voice was steady. It was the only steady thing in the house. "NSID. ID 74 Alpha Zulu 9. I am the reporting officer." The lead agent looked at me. He scanned my face, then my stance. He saw the lack of fear. He signaled to his team. "Secure the civilians. Isolate the subjects." 2 agents moved toward my family. Diane recoiled as an agent reached for her arm. "Do not touch me, Noel." "What did you do? What is happening?" She was looking at me with a mixture of horror and betrayal. She looked at the agents, then back at me, as if waiting for me to laugh and say, "It was all a prank." "Noel," she shrieked. "Explain this." I looked at her. I saw the woman who had used a master key to invade my privacy. I saw the woman who had called me dramatic. I saw the woman who had belittled my career for a decade. I followed protocol. I said. The words were cold. They hung in the air, freezing the hysteria for a heartbeat. Diane's face crumbled. She slumped onto the sofa, sobbing into her hands. Frank tried to step forward. He puffed out his chest, trying to summon the authority of a father, a manager, a homeowner. "Now see here," he said, his voice trembling with rage. "I am Frank Harmon. I own this house. You have no right to come in here and terrify my wife. I want to see a warrant. I want to speak to your supervisor." The agent nearest to him did not even blink. He stepped into Frank's personal space, forcing my father to step back. "Sit down, sir," the agent said. "I am not sitting down until sit down." The command was a physical blow. The agent placed a hand on Frank's shoulder and shoved. It was not a polite nudge. It was a tactical redirection of center of gravity. Frank collapsed back into his recliner. The wind knocked out of him. He looked up, stunned. He had never been handled like that in his life. He was a man who yelled at waiters. He was not a man who got shoved by federal agents. Brielle was huddled on the love seat, clutching a throw pillow to her chest. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her perfect makeup. She looked at the agents, then at the guns, then at me. She did not ask questions. She was smart enough to know that questions didn't matter right now. She was terrified. She looked at me like I was a stranger, a monster who had invited wolves into the sheep pen. The lead agent turned to me. He holstered his sidearm. Though his hand stayed near his belt, he lifted his visor. I recognized him. It was Miller. We had worked a joint task force briefly 3 years ago. He was a good operator, efficient, zero sense of humor. "Harmon," Miller said. "Situation report." I pointed to the coffee table. Classified materials were removed from a secure container in my absence. I spoke like I was dictating a memo. My voice sounded robotic to my own ears. Physical copies of Appendix C, Operation Glass Harbor, pages 1 through 12. Miller looked at the table. He saw the papers spread out among the wine glasses and the remote control. He winced visibly. "Contamination," he asked. Confirmed. I said. I pointed at Logan. Subject 1, Logan Harmon. He photographed page 7 using a personal cellular device. Miller's head snapped toward Logan. Logan was pressed against the wall, breathing fast and shallow. Miller gestured to his team. Baggett? An agent moved on Logan. Phone. Now. Logan fumbled in his pocket. I didn't mean. It was just. Phone. Logan pulled his phone out. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. The agent snatched it from his hand. He produced a Faraday bag, a silver, radio frequency shielding pouch designed to block all incoming and outgoing signals. He dropped the phone inside and sealed it with a strip of heavy-duty Velcro. The sound of the Velcro ripping and sealing was loud in the quiet room. Target device secured. The agent announced. Did he transmit? Miller asked me. Affirmative, I said. I saw a delivered notification. Timestamp approximately 4 minutes ago. Recipient unknown. Miller cursed under his breath. He tapped his earpiece. Control, we have a confirmed exfiltration. I need a localized signal jammer on this grid immediately. Kill the Wi-Fi. Kill the cell towers in a 2-mile radius if you have to. The lights on the router in the hallway blinked once, then went dead. The smart TV in the corner went black. The house was now an island, cut off from the digital world. Diane looked up from her hands. You killed the internet, she whispered. Why? No one answered her. Miller turned back to me. Who touched the papers? I looked at my family. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It was clarity. I was seeing them not as my parents and siblings, but as liabilities. Subject 1, Logan Harmon. I said, pointing. Subject 2, Frank Harmon. Subject 3, Diane Harmon. All three had physical contact with the documents. And her Miller pointed at Brielle. Visual contact only. I said, she arrived on the scene after the documents were exposed. She did not handle them. Miller nodded. He turned to his team. Secure the evidence. I want fingerprints on every page before you bag them. Seal the room upstairs. I want a full sweep for listening devices. If they breach the room, we have to assume the laptop is compromised. An agent moved to the coffee table. He put on blue nitrile gloves. He picked up the papers with tweezers, placing them carefully into evidence bags. Frank watched them take the papers. Those are private property, he mumbled. Miller turned on him. He leaned down, his face inches from my father's. Those are the property of the United States government, Miller said. His voice was low and dangerous. And you are currently in possession of stolen federal property classified top secret. Do you understand the words I'm saying to you? Frank opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at me for help. Noelle, tell him, Frank said. Tell him we are your parents. I looked at my father. I looked at the man who had taught me to ride a bike, the man who had paid for my college, the man who had laughed when I said my job was important. I cannot help you. Dad, I said, you are not my parents right now. You are subjects in an investigation. Frank flinched as if I had slapped him. Miller straightened up. He looked at the agent holding the Faraday bag. Hook it up to the field kit, Miller ordered. I want to know where that picture went. Now. The agent walked over to a Pelican case they had brought in. He opened it, revealing a ruggedized laptop and a tangle of cables. He connected the Faraday bag via a shielded cable, bypassing the phone's radio but accessing its hard drive. The room was silent, save for the tapping of keys and the heavy breathing of my mother. I stood in the center of the room, my arms crossed. I was cold. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. I looked at the destroyed door. I looked at the muddy boot prints on the carpet. I looked at the neighbors gathering on the sidewalk outside, their phones held up, filming the spectacle. This was it, the nuclear option. I had pressed the button, and now the fallout was settling on everything I had ever known. Agent Miller walked over to the technician. He leaned over the screen. Got it, the technician said. Extraction complete. We have the message log. Miller looked at the screen. He frowned. Show me, he said. The technician turned the screen. Miller stared at it for a long moment. Then he looked up at me. His expression had changed. It was no longer just professional anger. It was something else. Concern. Harmon. Miller said, "Come here." I walked over. My legs felt like lead. Miller pointed at the screen. The image of page 7 was there, clear and bright, and above it, the phone number. I looked at the number. It was not a local area code. It was not a standard mobile number. It was a sequence of digits that triggered a memory buried deep in my training. "That is not a broker," I whispered. Miller nodded grimly. "It is not." He tapped a key. Bringing up a database query, the number was highlighted in red. Next to it was a flag icon, a skull. "This number is on the active watch list for the Office of Foreign Assets Control," Miller said. "It belongs to a facilitator we have been tracking for 6 months. He is not a construction consultant. Harmon. He is a cleaner for the Volkov Syndicate." I felt the blood drain from my face. Logan had not just sent the file to a competitor. He had not just sent it to a shady businessman. He had sent the blueprints of a federal investigation directly to the people we were hunting. I looked at Logan. He was still cowering in the corner, looking small and pathetic. He had no idea what he had done. He thought he was playing the game of business. He thought he was being clever. He had just handed a loaded gun to a murderer. Miller looked at me. "This just went from a mishandling charge to aiding and abetting a foreign adversary." He said quietly, "Your brother is in a lot of trouble." "Noel." I looked at the screen again. I looked at the red flag. "I know." I said. Miller signaled to the agents standing near Logan. "Cuff him." The agents moved. They grabbed Logan's arms. He yelped. "Hey, what are you doing, Dad? Help!" Diane screamed again. "Stop it. He is just a boy. He didn't mean it." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was loud and final. Click, click, click. They spun him around and marched him toward the door. I watched him go. I watched my brother being led out of our childhood home in handcuffs, past the ruined door, past the weeping hydrangeas, into the flashing lights of the SUVs. I felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. I felt a terrible, crushing weight. But it wasn't sympathy. It was the weight of accuracy. I had been right. I had been right all along. They should have listened to the no, but they never believed no was a real word. Now, they were learning it in a language they could not ignore. The perimeter lights of the tactical vehicles had turned the front lawn into a stage for a play I never wanted to star in. Through the shattered remains of the front door, I could see them, the neighbors, the Joneses from across the street, the retired couple who walked their golden retriever at 6 a.m, the teenagers who usually sped by in their parents' sedans. They were all standing on the sidewalk, a silent, staring wall of judgment. Their phones were raised, recording the destruction of the Harmon reputation in high definition. It was the quintessential American suburban tragedy. Live streamed for the amusement of strangers. Inside the house, the air was thick with the smell of sweat and panic. The initial adrenaline of the breach had settled into a grim bureaucratic dismantling of my family's life. Diane was sitting on the sofa. Flanked by 2 agents, she was no longer crying. She was vibrating with a frantic, denial-fueled energy. "I only read it," she kept saying, her voice pitching up at the end of every sentence like a question. "I just wanted to read it. Mothers are allowed to read their children's papers. It is not a crime to be interested. It is not a crime." Frank was pacing in the small area the agents allowed him, rubbing his chest. "I just wanted to understand her," he muttered to no one in particular. "She never tells us anything. A father has a right to know what his daughter does. I was just looking." From the hallway where they were holding Logan before transport, his voice drifted in, thin and pathetic. "I just took a picture for a souvenir. It was just a souvenir. I was going to delete it. They were all saying the same thing. Just a look, just a picture, just a file." They were trying to minimize the treason they had committed down to the level of a parking ticket. It was meaningless noise. The federal agents ignored them with the practiced indifference of professionals who knew that everyone is innocent until the handcuffs go on. Agent Miller walked out of the kitchen. He was holding a device that swept for electronic signals. He looked at me. "Harmon," he said, "we are clearing the rest of the house. We need to secure all data storage devices. If they were willing to photograph documents, we have to assume they tried to copy files to hard drives. He pointed toward the study at the end of the hall. My father's home office. Is there a safe in the premises? Miller asked. Frank stopped pacing. He looked up, his eyes darting to the study door. No, he said quickly. No safe. Just a filing cabinet. Old tax papers. Nothing digital. I looked at my father. I saw the bead of sweat trickle down his temple. I saw the way his hand twitched toward his pocket. There is a safe, I said. My voice was flat. Behind the oil painting of the sailboat, it is a wall unit. Frank spun on me. Noelle, that is private. That has nothing to do with your work. Miller did not even look at Frank. He signaled 2 agents. Breach the safe. We walked into the study. It was a room that smelled of cedar and my father's cheap cigars. It was the room where he played at being an important businessman, surrounding himself with leather-bound books he never read. The agents removed the painting, a generic seascape my mother had bought at a clearance sale, and revealed the steel face of a wall safe. Open it, Miller commanded Frank. I cannot. Frank stammered. I forgot the combination. Miller turned to the tech specialist who had followed us in. Drill it? Wait, Frank shouted. He slumped, defeated. Fine. Left 20, right 10, left 45. The agent spun the dial. The tumblers clicked into place with a heavy mechanical thud. The handle turned. The door swung open. I expected to see the usual hoard of a man like Frank Harmon. Maybe some cash in envelopes. Maybe a backup hard drive. Perhaps the family birth certificates. And those things were there. But as the agent began to pull the contents out and lay them on my father's mahogany desk, the narrative of the night began to shift. It was not just family records. There were stacks of folders held together with thick rubber bands. The agent opened the first one. It was full of loan applications, rejected loan applications, banks I had never heard of, credit unions in states we had never lived in. Miller picked up a document from the bottom of the stack. He frowned, adjusting the light on his tactical helmet to illuminate the paper. Harmon. He called me over. Take a look at this. I walked to the desk. I looked down at the document. It was a deed of trust, a lien against the house. But it was not a standard mortgage document. It was a private lending agreement. The interest rate listed was predatory 18%. The lender was an LLC registered in Nevada. But that was not what made the room spin. It was the bottom of the page, the signature line. There were 2 signatures. One was Frank Harmon. The other was Noelle Harmon. I stared at the black ink. It looped and curled in a way that looked terrifyingly familiar. It had the same sharp slant on the N, the same flourish on the H. To an untrained eye, to a bank clerk, even to me at a quick glance. It looked like my signature, but I had never seen this document in my life. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that was far deeper than the chill of the open door. Is this your signature? Miller asked. I looked at the date. 6 months ago. I was in Brussels that week for a NATO summit. No, I whispered. Miller looked at me. Are you sure? It is a very good likeness. I looked at Frank. He was refusing to meet my eyes. He was staring at the carpet, his jaw clenched tight. I did not sign this. I said, my voice trembling for the first time that night, I have never seen this loan. I did not co-sign for this money. Miller picked up another document, and this, it was a guarantor agreement for a business line of credit. $50,000, signed Noelle Harmon, and this, a surety bond, $20,000, signed Noelle Harmon. I flipped through the stack. There were dozens of them. For 2 years, my name had been signed on documents I knew nothing about. My credit, my security clearance, my identity, they had all been leveraged. I looked at Frank. You forged my signature. I said, it was not a question. Frank looked up. His face was a mask of defensive anger. We needed the liquidity. Noelle. The retirement fund took a hit. The house needed repairs. You have that government job. You have perfect credit. You never use it. It was just on paper. We were paying it back. You committed identity theft against a federal employee, Miller said. He sounded disgusted. From the hallway, Logan shouted. He was struggling against the agent holding him. Hey, That is private family business. That has nothing to do with the classified files. You cannot look at that." Miller turned slowly to look at the doorway. "Actually," Miller said, his voice deadly calm, "it has everything to do with it. It establishes motive." Miller turned back to the safe. He reached into the very back, behind the stacks of cash. He pulled out a small black ledger. It was not a bank book. It was a handwritten log. He opened it. He ran his finger down the column of numbers. He stopped at an entry dated 3 weeks ago. Payment to VK, 10,000. Late fee. Miller looked at me. "V.K.," he said. "Victor Kogan, the broker." The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a car crash. The desperation, the questions about the contract, the pressure to help Logan. This wasn't about a failed construction project. This wasn't about a bad quarter. "Logan," I said, my voice loud enough to carry to the hallway. "Who is V.K.?" Logan stopped struggling. The silence from the hallway was answer enough. Miller answered for him. "He is a fence for the syndicate. Noel. He buys industrial secrets. He buys dual-use tech. And apparently, he buys debt." Miller tossed the ledger onto the desk. It landed with a heavy slap. "Your brother did not just lose money on a project," Miller said. "He is in the hole to a loan shark who specializes in turning debtors into assets. That is why he wanted the files. He wasn't trying to win a contract. He was trying to pay off a kill fee." I felt sick. I physically gagged, my hand flying to my mouth. They had not just looked at my files because they were nosy. They had not just wanted to see what Miss High and Mighty did all day. They were hunting. They were hunting for something, anything they could sell to get the wolf off their door. And they had decided that my career, my safety, and my freedom were acceptable currency to pay their debts. I turned to look at Diane. She was standing in the doorway of the study, watching us. Her face was pale, stripped of all its usual haughty composure. Brielle was standing next to her. Brielle, who had been crying, was now staring at our mother with a look of dawning horror. "Mom," Brielle whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "You knew Diane looked away. We had to protect Logan. He was in trouble. Brielle, bad people were calling the house." Brielle pointed at the stack of forged documents on the desk. "And these, you used Noel's name. You stole her identity." Diane straightened her spine, trying to summon a shred of dignity. "We did what we had to do to keep this family afloat. Noel has plenty. She is single. She has no kids. She has that secure job. She could absorb the risk. We were going to tell her eventually. Once Logan's deal went through." Brielle stepped back from her mother as if Diane were contagious. "You were not protecting the family," Brielle said. "You were feeding Noel to the wolves to save yourselves." The truth hung in the room, ugly and undeniable. I looked at the stack of papers, my signature, forged over and over again, my name, used as a shield for their incompetence and their greed. I realized then that the master key in the kitchen drawer was not an oversight. It was a tool. They had kept it because they needed access. They needed to know when I was home, what I brought with me, and what I was worth. I was not their daughter. I was their collateral. Miller looked at me. His eyes were sympathetic, but his duty was clear. We have to bag all of this. Harmon, the forgery, the fraud, the ledger, it is all evidence of susceptibility to coercion. This goes to your clearance review. I know. I said. I looked at Frank and Diane. They looked small now. The parents who had loomed so large in my life, whose approval I had spent 3 decades trying to earn, were just petty criminals. They were desperate people who had dug a hole and tried to throw me into it to fill the gap. Bag it. I said to Miller, bag it all. I turned and walked out of the study. I walked past Diane without looking at her. I walked past Frank without acknowledging his existence. I walked to the front door and stood in the broken frame, breathing in the night air. The neighbors were still watching. The lights were still flashing. But the mystery was gone. There was no confusion left. This was not an accident. This was a harvest. And for the first time in my life, I was glad the black SUVs had come, because if they hadn't, I might never have known that the people I called family were the most dangerous threat I had ever faced. The silence that follows a tactical raid is not peaceful. It is a vacuum. It sucks the air out of the room and leaves behind a ringing in your ears that sounds suspiciously like the end of your life. After the SUVs drove away, carrying my brother in handcuffs and my parents in the back of a sedan for voluntary questioning, I was left standing in the ruins of my childhood home. The front door was a splintered mouth gaping open to the street. The carpet was stained with wine and mud. The air smelled of burnt gunpowder, not from shots fired, but from the flashbangs the entry team had prepped but hadn't used. I spent the next 3 hours signing forms, chain of custody logs, incident reports, witness statements. Agent Miller handed me a clipboard, his face unreadable. "You know the drill." "Harmon," he said. "Administrative leave effectively immediately. Pending review." I nodded. I signed my name. It looked strange on the paper, the same name that had been forged on loan documents a room away. When the last agent left, sealing the evidence tape over the door of the study, I was alone. I did not cry. I did not scream. I got into my car, drove to a motel 10 miles away, and sat on the edge of the bed until the sun came up. But if the night was a physical assault, the morning was a psychological siege. It started with a text from Aunt Carol at 7:30 in the morning. "Noelle, I just heard from your mother. I cannot believe you would do this to your own family. To call the police on your father on his retirement weekend. Have you lost your mind?" I stared at the screen. My mother was out. Of course she was out. They hadn't arrested her, not yet. They had detained her for questioning regarding the unauthorized access, but without immediate proof of intent to distribute by her specifically. She was released pending further investigation, and she had wasted no time in spinning the narrative. My phone began to buzz, a call from my cousin Mark, a voicemail from Uncle Bob, a stream of notifications from the family group chat, which I had muted but not left. Family First Group Chat. Aunt Linda. Is it true? Noelle had Logan arrested, cousin Sarah. Mom said Noelle planted the files to get a promotion. She said Noelle wanted to look like a hero at work. Uncle Bob, disgusting. Turning on your own blood for a government paycheck? Shameful. I sat in the motel room, the air conditioner rattling in the window, and watched my character be assassinated in real time. Diane was not just defending herself. She was on the offensive. She was telling anyone who would listen that I was unstable. She was saying that I had left the files out on purpose. She claimed I had been baiting them all weekend, waiting for them to make a mistake so I could flex my authority. She told them I was cold, that I hated the family, that I had been looking for an excuse to cut them off. She didn't even warn us. Diane had told Aunt Carol. She just smiled and dialed the SWAT team. She wanted to see her father humiliated. It was a lie so audacious it took my breath away, but it was working, because to them, I was the outsider. I was the one with the secrets. Diane and Frank were the pillars of the community, the ones who hosted barbecues and volunteered at the church. Who would they believe? The nice lady who baked lasagna, or the daughter who carried a biometric lockbox and spoke in acronyms? I drove back to my apartment in the city, feeling like a fugitive. When I logged into my secure email access restricted, read only, I saw the official notification from NSID, Subject Security Clearance Review. Interim suspension, Agent Harmon. Effectively immediately. Your top secret/SCI clearance is suspended pending a counterintelligence adjudication. You are to report to the Office of Professional Responsibility on Monday at 0900 hours. I was grounded. In the intelligence world, a suspended clearance is a career death sentence. Even if you get it back, the stain remains. You become a risk. You become the person who let their family compromise an operation. I put the phone down and stared at the wall. I felt a vibration in my hand. Another text. This one was from Logan. He was out on bail. Of course he was. The initial charges were mishandling of classified info, not espionage yet. The espionage charge would take weeks to build as they traced the data trail. Logan. You need to fix this, Noelle. You need to tell them you gave me permission. If you don't, I am going to tell them you handed me the file. I will say you asked me to find a buyer. I read the text twice. My hands started to shake. He was blackmailing me, my own brother, who had sold my country out for a loan shark, was now threatening to frame me for treason if I didn't cover for him. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Any response would be evidence. I called Brielle. She was the doctor. She was the rational one. She had been there. She had seen the look on Miller's face. Brielle picked up on the second ring. Her voice was tight. Hushed. Noelle Brielle, I said, relief washing over me. Thank God. Have you seen what they are saying? Logan just threatened me. You have to tell Mom to stop lying to the relatives. There was a long pause on the other end. Noelle. Look, I know it got out of hand, but maybe you could just talk to your boss. I froze. What Mom is a wreck. Noelle. Dad is sitting in the dark staring at the wall. Logan is terrified. They are saying he could go away for 20 years. He committed a federal crime. Brielle. He sent active intelligence to a syndicate fence, I know. But is it really that bad? Or is it just paperwork bad? I felt the room spin. Brielle. He sold out an operation. People could die. Do you not understand? Brielle sighed. I hear you. But they are family. Mom says if you just write a statement saying it was a misunderstanding, that you left the files out by accident and they didn't know what they were. Maybe they can drop the charges. You want me to lie, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You want me to perjure myself and lose my career to save Logan from the consequences of his own greed. It is not perjury, Noelle. It is reframing. You can get another job. Logan has kids. He has a life. If he goes to prison, it destroys everything. And if I go to prison for lying to the FBI, I asked. You won't go to prison, Brielle said, her voice taking on that soothing tone she used with difficult patience. You are the victim, right? They will go easy on you. Just take one for the team, for Mom and Dad. I hung up. I sat there in the silence of my apartment, realizing the true extent of my isolation. It wasn't just that they didn't understand my job. It was that they valued their own comfort more than my integrity. They valued Logan's freedom more than my truth. I was not a daughter to them. I was a resource, and now that the resource was malfunctioning, they were trying to dismantle it. That afternoon, the story broke locally. It wasn't on the national news yet, but it was on the Bracken Ridge Community Forum on Facebook. A cousin had posted it. Prayers for the Harmon family, their daughter Noelle, who works for the government, called a SWAT team on her own parents last night because they looked at some papers she left on a table. Imagine doing that to the people who raised you. Heartless. The comments were a cesspool. Ungrateful brat. Government overreach starting at home. I bet she is hiding something illegal and got scared. I was being tried in the court of public opinion by people who thought classified meant private. I turned off my phone. I couldn't look at it anymore. Then came the email. It wasn't from a family member. It was from a law firm, Donnelly Associates. I opened the attachment. It was a formal letter of demand, representing Frank, Diane, and Logan Harmon. Dear Ms. Harmon, we represent your family in the matter regarding the incident on the night of January 30th. Our clients maintain that the access to the documents in question was inadvertent and facilitated by your own negligence in securing sensitive materials in a common area of the residence. To avoid further litigation and potential civil suits regarding defamation of character and emotional distress caused to our clients, we propose a mutual settlement. You will sign the attached affidavit acknowledging that the documents were improperly secured and that you verbally authorized Logan Harmon to view them for consultation purposes. Failure to comply will result in our clients pursuing a full defense strategy that highlights your history of unstable behavior and professional negligence. I stared at the letter. A trap. A paper trap. If I signed it, I would be admitting to a felony mishandling classified information and authorizing an uncleared civilian to view it. I would go to prison. I would lose my clearance forever. But if I didn't sign it, they would drag me through the mud. They would testify against me. They would say I was crazy. They would say I was incompetent. They were giving me a choice: destroy myself to save them, or destroy them to save myself. I looked at the signature block at the bottom of the letter. It was CC'd to the NSID Office of General Counsel. They had already sent a copy to my boss. They were not just asking for a truce, they were trying to get me fired proactively to destroy my credibility as a witness. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. It was raining. The gray sky matched the gray feeling in my chest. I remembered the look on Diane's face when she held the files. I have a right to know. I remembered Frank's face when the safe was opened. It was just on paper. I remembered Logan's text. I will say you asked me to. They had rewritten the story. In their version, I was the villain. I was the cold, calculating government agent who entrapped her loving family. But they had made a mistake. They thought this was a family dispute. They thought this was an argument over Thanksgiving dinner that could be won with guilt trips and emotional manipulation. They didn't realize that they had entered my world now. The world of evidence, the world of paper trails, the world where feelings didn't matter. Only facts. They were trying to bury me with paper. I walked over to my bookshelf. I pulled down a binder. It was my personal log. I kept it for every assignment. Dates, times, locations. I opened my laptop, my personal one, not the seized government one. I started to type. I wasn't writing an affidavit of surrender. I was writing a timeline. I checked the time. It was 4 o'clock on Sunday. I had 16 hours before my hearing at the Office of Professional Responsibility. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. Not a family member, not a friend. I dialed the number of a lawyer I had met at a seminar 3 years ago, a specialist in federal employment law and security clearance defense, a shark who ate family dramas for breakfast. "Hello," a voice answered. "Mr. Sterling." I said, "This is Noelle Harmon. I have a situation involving a Section 793 violation, a compromised clearance, and a hostile group of witnesses who happen to be my immediate family. I'm listening." He said, "They sent me a letter demanding I confess to negligence." I said, "They CC'd my agency. Don't sign it." Sterling said immediately, "Bring it to me. I am bringing more than that." I said, "I am bringing the logs. I am bringing the texts. And I am bringing the receipts." "Good," Sterling said, "because if they want to play the negligence card, we are going to play the coercion card." And Noelle, "Yes. If they are willing to send you to jail to save their own skin, they are not your family anymore. They are the opposition." I closed my eyes. I felt a tear finally leak out, hot and stinging on my cheek. "I know," I said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the letter from my parents' lawyer one last time. Emotional distress, defamation. I crumpled the paper in my hand. They wanted a story, I would give them a story. But it wouldn't be the fairy tale where the daughter sacrifices herself for the ungrateful parents. It would be a tragedy, a realistic, brutal, American tragedy. And I would make sure every footnote was accurate. My lawyer, Arthur Sterling, was a man who viewed emotion as inefficiencies in the legal process. He did not offer tissues. He did not offer platitudes about how blood is thicker than water. He sat behind a glass desk that looked like a sheet of frozen ice, arranged the stack of affidavits I had given him, and looked at me over the rim of his spectacles. "We do not fight them with noise." "Noelle," he said, his voice dry and precise. "We fight them with paper. We bury them in the timeline." I sat in the leather chair opposite him, my hands folded in my lap. For the first time in 48 hours, I felt a strange sense of calm. I was done reacting. I was done being the shocked daughter standing in the hallway while her world imploded. I was returning to my factory settings. I was an analyst, and my family was no longer my kin. They were a hostile data set that needed to be processed. We began with the house. My parents had installed a smart security system 2 years ago. It was my father's pride and joy, a way to monitor the perimeter and control the thermostat from his phone. What Frank Harmon did not understand, and what most consumers fail to realize, is that these systems do not just keep bad people out, they keep a meticulous, second-by-second log of everything the people inside do. I had legal access to the cloud account because my name was on the billing registry, another instance of my father using my credit card to set up a service he promised to reimburse me for and never did. Sterling and I pulled the logs. We filtered the data for the sensor-labeled guest bedroom/Noelle's room. I expected to see the entry from Saturday night. The timestamp was there, 20:52 hours, door open, key override, but Sterling kept scrolling back. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a date 3 months prior, Thanksgiving, Thursday, November 28th, 1400 hours, door open, key override. I remembered that day. I was downstairs helping Brielle mash potatoes. I had locked my door because I had left my work phone on the charger. Sterling scrolled back further. Easter, Christmas, the 4th of July. There were dozens of entries. Every time I visited, every time I left the room to shower, to eat, or to run an errand. The door was opened. The duration of the entries varied. Sometimes it was 2 minutes. Sometimes it was 20. I felt a cold nausea settle in my stomach. This was not a one-time lapse in judgment born of desperation. This was a pattern. Diane had been entering my room for years. She had been reading my journals. She had been checking my bank statements if I left them out. She had been rifling through my pockets. The master key in the kitchen drawer was not a forgotten relic. It was a well-used tool of surveillance. She has been spying on you since you started at the agency. Sterling noted, highlighting the rows. This dismantles her defense that she just wanted to read it on a whim. This establishes a pattern of intrusive behavior and disregard for privacy boundaries. We moved on to Logan. The discovery phase of the criminal investigation was moving fast, and because I was a material witness and the victim of the identity theft. Sterling had access to the preliminary evidence list regarding the financial fraud. The FBI forensic accountants had scraped Logan's digital footprint. They found a text thread with a business partner, a man named Davis, dated 3 days before the party. "Davis, we are not going to make the bid deadline. Logan, we do not have the supply chain data. Logan, don't worry about it. I am going to Bracken Ridge this weekend. The sister is coming home. She holds the keys to the kingdom. I will get what we need." I read the text on Sterling's tablet. The words blurred for a second. "I will get what we need." It was premeditated. He did not stumble upon the files on the table and make a bad decision in the heat of the moment. He had gone to the house with the specific intent of extracting information from me. The conversation on the patio, the plea for help. It was all a setup. If I had not printed the files, he would have found another way. He would have tried to guess my password. He would have tried to steal the laptop itself. He targeted you. Sterling said, "This upgrades the narrative. You are not the instigator. You were the mark, armed with this data." I went to my interview with the Office of Professional Responsibility on Wednesday morning. The room was small, gray, and windowless. A camera recorded from the corner. 2 senior investigators sat across from me. They were not friendly. They were not there to help me. They were there to determine if I was a liability to national security. "Agent Harmon," the lead investigator said, glancing at a file, "you removed classified documents from a secure container and printed them in an unsecure location. Do you deny this?" "No." I said, "I did not waver. I did not make excuses. I printed Appendix C to facilitate a time-sensitive analysis regarding an active threat in Operation Glass Harbor. I made a judgment call to prioritize the speed of analysis over the standard protocol of digital-only review. That judgment call resulted in a compromise. The investigator countered, "The compromise was the result of a criminal act by a third party." I replied, "I secured the room. I engaged a deadbolt. I instructed the occupants of the house that the area was a sensitive compartmented information facility. Temporary status. The breach was effected using a hidden master key that I was led to believe had been destroyed 3 years ago. I pushed a folder across the table. "This is the log of that key's usage." I said, "As you can see, the intruder has a history of surreptitious entry. I took reasonable precautions against a standard family environment. I could not have reasonably predicted a hostile insider threat within my own immediate family." The investigator picked up the folder. He flipped through the pages. His eyebrows went up slightly when he saw the frequency of Diane's entries. Furthermore, I continued, my voice steady, when the breach was discovered, I did not attempt to cover it up. I did not attempt to negotiate with the subjects. I declared a code red immediately. I prioritized the containment of the intelligence over the welfare of my relatives. The room went silent. This was the crux of it. Most agents in my position would have hesitated. They would have tried to get the phone back themselves. They would have tried to delete the picture. They would have tried to save their brother. I had called the cavalry. The investigator looked at his partner, then back at me. You called the tactical team on your father's retirement party. He said, I called the tactical team on a confirmed data exfiltration event. I corrected. The location was irrelevant. The investigator closed the file. He leaned back. We are recommending a formal reprimand for the printing violation, he said. It will go in your permanent jacket. You will be on probation for 6 months. Your access to print capabilities will be revoked for a year. I nodded. I accepted that. It was fair, but, he added, we are reinstating your clearance effective immediately pending the final adjudication hearing next week. You acted with integrity. Agent Harmon. Cold integrity, but integrity nonetheless. I walked out of that building and felt the first breath of fresh air I had tasted in days. I had saved my career, but the war was not over. The investigation into the safe had opened a Pandora's box of financial ruin for my parents. The forged signatures on the loans were just the tip of the iceberg. The forensic team found that Frank had been moving money between accounts to hide the payments to the loan sharks. He had drained his 401k. He had taken out a second mortgage on the house one that I had supposedly co-signed. They were facing charges of wire fraud, bank fraud, and aggravated identity theft. And because the victim was a federal employee, the sentencing guidelines were severe. On Friday evening, I received a text from Brielle. Can we meet, please? Neutral ground. I am not recording you. I just need to know. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near the university, 20 minutes from the city center. It was a place we used to go when we were students. Before life and resentment drove a wedge between us, Brielle looked terrible. She was wearing sunglasses, even though it was overcast. Her hands were wrapped around a cup of herbal tea, and I could see the tremors in her fingers. She did not say hello. She just looked at me. Is it true, she asked? What the lawyer is saying that they are going to lose the house, that Logan might go to federal prison for 20 years. It is possible. I said, the Espionage Act carries heavy penalties, and the fraud charges against Mom and Dad are significant. Brielle took off her glasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. Mom says you are doing this out of spite. She whispered, she says you could stop it. She says if you just told the prosecutor that you gave them permission, it would all go away. She says you are choosing to destroy us. I reached into my bag and pulled out my tablet. I navigated to the screenshot of the text message between Logan and Davis. Read this, I said. Brielle looked at the screen. She read the words. She holds the keys to the kingdom. I will get what we need. She went pale. He planned it, I said softly. Before he even asked me for help on the porch, he had already promised his partner he would steal the data. And Mom. I swiped to the security logs. She's been breaking into my room for years. Brielle. Since I was 25. Brielle stared at the data. She was a doctor. She understood evidence. She understood diagnostics. She was looking at the X-ray of a cancer she had refused to believe was there. They were not just curious. Brielle, I said, they were harvesting me. I was the cash cow. I was the bailout plan. If Logan hadn't found the papers, do you think he would have stopped? Or would he have tried to force me? Would he have drugged me? He owed money to a syndicate that kills people. He was desperate. Brielle put her hand over her mouth. A sob escaped. A ragged, painful sound. I thought it was just a mistake. She stammered. I thought they were just stupid. They are stupid, I said, but they are also predatory. And you, Brielle, you were the cover. You were the good daughter who made everything look normal so no one would look too closely at the cracks. Brielle slumped in her chair. She looked small, the illusion of the perfect Harmon family. the one she had tried so hard to maintain, shattered on the formica table between us. "I cannot help them," she whispered. "I cannot testify that this was an accident. Not after seeing this. No." I said, "You cannot, and if you try, you will be perjuring yourself for people who would sell you out just as fast as they sold me out." She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "What are we going to do?" "Noelle." I stood up. I put the tablet back in my bag. "We are going to tell the truth," I said. "That is all we can do." I left her there, weeping into her tea. It was cruel, perhaps, to leave her alone, but I had no comfort left to give. My reservoir of empathy had been drained dry by the people who were supposed to refill it. The following Monday, the notification arrived. It came via certified mail to my apartment, a thick envelope from the Department of Justice. I opened it. Inside were 2 summonses. The first was for my final clearance adjudication hearing. Date Tuesday, February 10th. Time 0900 hours. Location Federal Plaza. Room 404. The second was a subpoena to appear as a material witness in the case of United States versus Logan Harmon, et al., date Tuesday, February 10th. Time 1300 hours. Location Federal Plaza. Room 802. I stared at the papers. The same day, the same building, 2 different rooms. In the morning, I would fight to save my life's work. In the afternoon, I would walk down the hall and seal the fate of my family. It was poetic. In a dark, twisted way, Tuesday would be the day the Harmon family legacy was legally dissolved. I walked over to my calendar and picked up a red marker. I circled the date. I did not feel happy. I did not feel triumphant. Revenge, I realized, did not taste sweet. It tasted like ash and ink. But as I looked at the timeline I had built, at the mountain of evidence that proved I was right, I felt something else. I felt clean. I was no longer the crazy daughter. I was no longer the difficult sister. I was the witness. And on Tuesday, I would testify. The news broke on a Thursday morning, 3 days before my scheduled hearing. It was a sterile, sanitized press release issued by the Department of Justice, burying the lead under layers of bureaucratic jargon. To the average citizen scrolling through their news feed while drinking coffee, it was just another headline about national security. Federal authorities dismantle multi-state illicit technology ring. But I knew what it meant. Operation Glass Harbor was closed. The raid I had precipitated, the data analysis I had printed in my childhood bedroom had worked. The timeline I constructed had been accurate to the minute. The FBI had intercepted the shipment in Newark 20 minutes before it was slated to be loaded onto a container ship bound for a non-extradition port. They seized guidance chips, thermal sensors, and enough dual-use circuitry to equip a drone army. They arrested 4 middlemen, 2 dock workers, and a financier in Delaware. It was a massive win. It was the kind of victory that usually results in commendations, handshakes, and a bottle of expensive scotch on the director's desk. I got none of that. I sat in Director Arden's office on Friday afternoon. The blinds were drawn. The room was quiet. Arden sat behind his desk, his hands clasped over a file folder that bore my name. "You were right. Noelle," Arden said. He did not smile. The intelligence was solid. The correlation between the shell companies and the shipping manifest was the key. We stopped them. "Thank you, Director," I said. I sat with my back straight, my hands on my knees, but, Arden continued, his voice dropping an octave, "The way you achieved that result was a catastrophic failure of protocol. You removed top-secret documents from a secure environment. You created physical copies in an uncontrolled setting. You allowed those copies to be accessed by uncleared civilians. And you allowed a photograph of those documents to be transmitted to a hostile actor." "I understand." Arden slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. It was heavy, cream-colored stock. "This is a formal reprimand," he said. "It will be placed in your permanent personnel jacket. It cites you for a Level 3 security violation. You are stripped of remote work privileges for 24 months. You are ineligible for promotion to section chief for 3 years. and you are required to attend 40 hours of remedial information security training. I picked up the paper. It felt heavy in my hand. It was a scar. It was a black mark that would follow me for the rest of my career. Every time I applied for a new clearance, every time I was vetted for a project, this piece of paper would be there. "Sign it," Arden said. I took a pen from my pocket. I signed Noelle Harmon. The ink was dark and permanent. "I am keeping you on." "Harmon," Arden said as I slid the paper back. "Not because I want to, but because you are the only one who saw the pattern. You are a good analyst. But you are a liability. If you ever, and I mean ever, compromise a file again, I will not just fire you, I will prosecute you myself." I walked out of the office holding my career in my hands. It was damaged, taped together, and fragile. But it was still mine. I had survived the professional fallout. The personal fallout, however, was just beginning to reach critical mass. By Saturday, the reality of Logan's situation had finally penetrated the thick skull of his denial. The initial charges had scared off his investors, but the revelation that he had communicated with a syndicate fence had turned him into a pariah. I heard through my lawyer, Sterling, that Logan's consulting firm had been dissolved. His business partners had not just walked away, they had run. They had issued statements distancing themselves from him, claiming no knowledge of his activities. His accounts were frozen. His car had been repossessed from his driveway in front of his weeping children. He was no longer the golden boy of the Harmon family. He was a toxicity. He was a man who had tried to sell his country to pay a gambling debt, and he had failed at both. But did that make him sorry? No. It made him desperate, and it made my parents vicious. On Saturday afternoon, a courier delivered an envelope to my apartment building. It was not from a lawyer. It was personal stationery. Heavy, floral-scented paper that I recognized instantly. It was Diane's. I sat at my kitchen table and opened it. The handwriting was jagged, frantic, lacking the usual cursive elegance my mother prided herself on. "Noelle, I am writing this because your father cannot hold a pen. He is shaking too much. He has not slept in 4 days. I hope you are happy. I am your mother. I carried you. I raised you. I forgave you for every time you forgot to call, every time you missed a holiday. I have a right to know what happens in my own house. I have a right to know who my daughter really is. And instead of sharing your life with us, you turned us into criminals. We only wanted to survive. Logan only wanted to save his family. You had the power to help us, and you refused. So we took what we needed. That is what families do, they share. But you are not family anymore. You are a machine. You are cold and cruel, and I do not know where you came from. If you testify on Tuesday, if you stand up in that room and tell them we are thieves, you are killing us. You are killing your father. I hope your classified files can keep you warm at night, because you will have nothing else. Mom." I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and placed it in the evidence file I was preparing for Tuesday. It was a masterpiece of narcissism. Even now, facing federal prison, she viewed herself as the victim. She viewed my boundaries as an insult and her theft as a right. She did not mention the forgery. She did not mention the debt to the syndicate. She only mentioned her feelings. It was not a letter. It was a confession of motive. An hour later, my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, the voice was unfamiliar. It was a woman, older, sounding hesitant. It was Aunt Carol. "Noelle, honey, it is Carol. Listen, your dad asked me to call. He cannot call you himself because of the lawyers. He wanted me to tell you that he loves you. He said to tell you that if you love him, you will fix this. He said you know how to talk to these people. He said you can tell them it was a misunderstanding. Please, Noelle, he is an old man. He is scared. Just make it go away." I deleted the voicemail. "If you love him, you will fix this." It was the same refrain I had heard my entire life. If I loved them, I would change my major. If I loved them, I would lend Logan money. If I loved them, I would come home every weekend. Love, in the Harmon family, was a currency used to purchase compliance. And I was finally bankrupt. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't trying to manipulate me. I called Brielle. She answered on the first ring, sounding exhausted. She was at the hospital, hiding in an on-call room. "They are getting worse," Brielle whispered. "Mom is tearing the house apart looking for things to sell to pay the lawyers. She is screaming at Dad. She is screaming at the walls." "Do they understand what is happening on Tuesday?" I asked. "No," Brielle said. "They think you are going to save them. They really do, Noelle. They think at the last minute you will walk into that courtroom and tell the judge that you gave Logan permission. They think you will fall on your sword. And you," I asked, "what do you think?" There was a silence on the line. Then Brielle spoke, her voice breaking. "I think they broke you, Noelle. And I think they don't even care. I watched Dad yesterday. He wasn't crying because he hurt you. He was crying because he can't go to the country club anymore. He is worried about his reputation, not his daughter." I closed my eyes. Hearing it confirmed was painful, but necessary. They never apologized. "Did they?" I asked. "No," Brielle said. "They just want to escape." I hung up the phone. I felt a profound sense of loneliness. But it was a solid loneliness. It was the feeling of standing on a rock in the middle of a storm. It was cold, and it was wet, but it was stable. Late that evening, Arthur Sterling called me. His voice was brisk, devoid of the weekend sluggishness that affected normal people. "We have a development," Sterling said. "The forensic team finished the deep dive on Logan's devices." "What did they find?" I asked. "More texts." "Better," Sterling said. "Or worse, depending on how you look at it." He sent a file to my secure inbox. I opened it while he stayed on the line. It was a log from the University of Maryland's alumni server. Date January 29th. Time 2300 hours. IP address residential. Harmon household. Target account Noelle Harmon, class of 2012. Action failed password attempt. Password reset request initiated. Recovery email used lharmon_consulting@gmail.com. I stared at the screen. January 29th. That was the Thursday before the party, before I had even arrived home. "Logan tried to hack my college email," I asked. Confused. "Why, there is nothing there." Sterling's voice was grim. He wasn't looking for classified files there. Noelle, he was looking for dirt. He was looking for embarrassing photos, old emails, anything he could use as leverage. He was trying to build a blackmail file on you 2 days before you even walked through the door. I felt the air leave my lungs. He knew he was going to ask for the favors. Sterling continued. "And he knew you would say no, so he prepared a backup plan. If you wouldn't give him the government contracts, he was going to threaten to leak personal information about you to force your hand. He didn't just stumble into a crime. Noelle, he was actively plotting to coerce you." I looked at the log entry, password reset request. He tried to lock me out of my own past so he could rifle through it. It was the final severance. The last tiny thread of doubt, the idea that maybe, just maybe, Logan was just a panicked idiot snapped. He was not an idiot. He was a predator. He was a man who would burn his sister to the ground to keep himself warm. "This goes into the evidence pile," I asked Sterling. "Top of the stack," Sterling said. "It proves premeditation. It proves malice. It destroys any defense that he was a passive observer." "Do it," I said. I hung up and looked around my apartment. It was a new place, a temporary corporate rental I had moved into after the raid because the press had found my old address. It was sterile, white walls, gray furniture, no pictures. I walked into the bedroom. My suit for tomorrow was hanging on the doorframe. Navy blue, sharp, professional, the armor of an analyst. Next to it was a small box of personal items I had retrieved from the house during a supervised escort by the agents. My debate trophies, a few books, a picture of me and Brielle when we were 10, before the world got complicated. I looked at the picture, 2 smiling girls with braided hair. We looked happy. We looked like we had a future. I realized then that tomorrow, I wasn't just testifying, I was performing an amputation. I was cutting off the gangrenous limb of my family to save the rest of my life. It would hurt. I would limp for a long time. I would probably feel the phantom pain of them for the rest of my years, the parents I wanted them to be, the brother I thought I had. But if I didn't cut, the infection would kill me. I turned off the light in the bedroom. I stood in the dark, listening to the city rain against the window. I was alone. I had a reprimand in my file. I had a family that hated me. I had a sister who was too weak to stand beside me. But as I looked at the silhouette of my suit, I felt a strange, cold comfort. I was right. I had always been right. And tomorrow, in a room full of strangers and stenographers, I would finally make them say it. Tuesday morning arrived with the gray, oppressive weight of a verdict hanging in the sky. Federal Plaza was a monolith of concrete and glass, a building designed to make human beings feel small and insignificant. I walked through the security checkpoint at 8:30 in the morning. I placed my bag on the belt. I walked through the metal detector. I did not look back at the revolving doors where my family would be entering in 3 hours. My war was being fought on 2 fronts, in 2 different rooms, on the same floor. The first battle was for my life. I entered room 404 at exactly 9 o'clock. The adjudication panel consisted of 3 senior officials from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. They sat behind a raised dais, flanked by flags that looked heavy and still. I stood at the podium. I did not fidget. I wore the navy suit. I wore my hair pulled back. I looked like what I was, a tool of the state. "Agent Harmon," the presiding officer said, his voice dry as parchment. "We have reviewed the incident report regarding the compromise of Operation Glass Harbor. You are accused of a Category 3 violation of handling protocols. How do you plead?" "I admit to the printing violation," I said. My voice was steady. "I prioritized the speed of analysis over the security of the medium. I created a physical vulnerability in a secure environment. That was a tactical error." The officer looked over his glasses, and the result of that error was the transmission of data to a hostile entity. "The result of that error," I corrected, "was the interception of a multi-million-dollar arms shipment. The transmission was the result of a criminal act by a third party. When that act occurred, I did not hesitate. I initiated a code red. I facilitated the arrest of the subjects. I placed the mission above my personal connections." I paused, looking each of them in the eye. "I am an analyst," I said. "My job is to see the world as it is, not as I wish it to be." I applied that same lens to my family. I did not protect them. I protected the data. The panel conferred for 20 minutes. The silence in the room was absolute. I counted the seconds. 1,200 seconds. Finally, the officer turned back to me. "Agent Harmon," he said, "we rarely see this level of detachment. Most agents would have tried to cover it up. You called the wolf down on your own house." He stamped a document. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Clearance reinstated," he said, with a probationary annotation. "You will work from the secure facility only. No remote access for 3 years. Do not make us regret this." I nodded. "Thank you, sir." I walked out of room 404. I had my badge. I had my gun. I had my career. I checked my watch. It was 12:30. The second battle was for the truth. I walked down the long, linoleum-tiled hallway to room 802. The air grew thicker as I approached. I could hear voices. I could smell the distinct, sharp scent of anxiety. I opened the heavy oak doors. My family was sitting at the defense table. They looked like strangers. Frank was slumped over, wearing a suit that looked 2 sizes too big for him now. Diane was pale, her lips pressed into a thin, white line. Logan was not there. He was being held in custody, patched in via a video feed from the detention center. His face on the monitor was gaunt, his eyes darting around the screen like a trapped animal. Their lawyer, a slick man with a comb-over named Mr. Gelson, was in the middle of his opening statement. "Your Honor," he was saying, gesturing broadly. "This is a case of entrapment." Noelle Harmon brought those documents into the home. She left them on a coffee table in a common area. She knew her family was curious. She knew her brother was in financial distress. She baited them. She created a crime where there was none so she could play the hero for her bosses. I walked to the witness stand. The room went quiet. I sat down. I placed my hands on the rail. "Ms. Harmon," the prosecutor asked, "did you bait your family?" "No." I said, "Mr." Gelson stood up. He walked toward me, smiling a predatory smile. "Mrs. Harmon, you claim you locked your door, yet your mother says the door was open. You claim you told them not to touch, yet your brother says you hinted that you could help him. Isn't it true that you wanted to punish them, that you resent them?" I looked at Gelson. Then I looked at my lawyer, Arthur Sterling, who was sitting in the front row. Sterling nodded. "I would like to enter evidence item number 4B, I said. Sterling stood up and handed a flash drive to the bailiff. The judge nodded. The large screen on the wall flickered to life. It was a text message thread, but it wasn't the one we had seen before. This was recovered from a deleted cache on Logan's cloud account. Date January 28th, 2 days before the party. Sender Logan Harmon, recipient VK, Victor Kogan. Logan, I am going to the house this weekend. She will be there. She has the clearance. I will get the files. I do not care what I have to do. I will get into her computer or her bag. Just have the money ready. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the air. Logan's face on the monitor went white. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. This was not a crime of opportunity. I said, my voice cutting through the noise. It was a premeditated extraction. He intended to steal from me before I even packed my car. Diane stood up. That is a lie. Logan would never. He is a good boy. He just made a mistake. Sit down, Mrs. Harmon, the judge barked. I turned to Diane. And you? I said. I looked at the bailiff. Play the hallway security footage. Timestamp 2055. The screen changed. It showed the upstairs hallway of the Harmon house. The camera angle was from the motion sensor my father had installed to catch burglars. In the video, I walked out of my bedroom. I locked the door. I walked down the stairs to go for my run. 10 seconds later, Diane appeared. She did not hesitate. She did not knock. She pulled the master key from her apron pocket. She unlocked the door and went inside. 2 minutes later, she came out. She was holding the white stack of papers. She walked to the railing and leaned over. Logan, she called out in the video. Her voice was tinny but clear. She is gone. I got them. Come look. The video froze on Diane's face. She looked triumphant. She looked excited. In the courtroom, the real Diane collapsed into her chair. She covered her face with her hands. You did not just want to read them. Mom, I said. The silence in the room was deafening. You stole them. You stole them to give to Logan because you knew he needed money. You chose his debt over my duty. I turned to Frank. He was staring at the table, refusing to look at the screen and the safe. Dad, I asked. Sterling handed another stack of papers to the judge. 17 counts of forgery. I said, you signed my name to $300,000 worth of high-interest loans. You used my credit score to plug the holes in your own lifestyle. You have been stealing my identity for 2 years. Frank looked up. His eyes were wet, but they were not filled with remorse. They were filled with anger. We are your parents, he shouted, his voice cracking. We paid for your college. We put a roof over your head. You owe us. It is just money. It is just paper. You have a government salary. You could have paid it off and never known. The judge slammed his gavel. Order. Order. In this court, but the damage was done. The jury and the judge had seen the truth. This was not a family tragedy. This was a conspiracy of parasites. Then, Brielle stood up. She was sitting in the gallery, behind our parents. She had been subpoenaed as a character witness for the defense. She walked to the stand, her legs shaking. Ms. Harmon, the defense lawyer said, desperate to salvage something. You know your sister. You know your parents. Surely you can testify to the loving environment of the Harmon home. Brielle looked at me. She looked at the video of Diane handing the stolen papers to Logan. She looked at the stack of forged loans. She took a deep breath. "There is no love in that house," Brielle said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "There is only leverage. They used Noelle. They have always used her. They called her cold because she wouldn't let them consume her, and when she finally said no, they tried to destroy her." Diane wailed. It was a high, thin sound. "Brielle, how can you say that? Because it is the truth." "Mom," Brielle said, tears streaming down her face. "You didn't want a daughter. You wanted an accomplice." The verdict came down 3 hours later. The federal justice system does not care about family dinners. It cares about statutes. Logan Harmon, found guilty of unauthorized possession of defense information and transmission to a foreign agent. Sentenced to 84 months in federal prison. 7 years. Frank Harmon, found guilty of aggravated identity theft and wire fraud. Sentenced to 36 months probation, restitution of $300,000, and a permanent ban on managing financial assets. Diane Harmon, found guilty of aiding and abetting the theft of government property. Sentenced to 24 months probation and 400 hours of community service, and for all three a permanent restraining order. They were to have no contact, direct or indirect, with Agent Noelle Harmon. The gavel banged. It was over. I walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was empty, save for a few straggling reporters. I headed toward the elevator. "Noelle." I stopped. I turned around. Diane and Frank were standing there, flanked by their lawyer. They looked old. In the span of 6 hours, they had aged 10 years. Diane took a step toward me. The lawyer put a hand on her arm to stop her, reminding her of the restraining order, but she shook him off. She looked at me. Her eyes were dry now. The hysteria was gone, replaced by a cold, hard bitterness. 7 years. "Noelle," she said. Her voice was like grinding stones. "Your brother is going to prison for 7 years. Your father is ruined. We have lost the house. We have lost everything." I looked at her. "I felt nothing. The cord was cut. You didn't lose it." I said, "You sold it." Diane narrowed her eyes. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Was it worth it?" she asked. "Was your precious job, your little secrets, your pride, was it worth destroying your own blood?" I looked at the woman who had unlocked my door. I looked at the man who had forged my name. I looked at the ghosts of the people I had tried so hard to please. I thought about the shipping container in Newark. I thought about the drone parts that would never kill a soldier. I thought about the integrity of the oath I had taken. I answered her, calm to the point of being cold. "It feels right," I said. I turned and walked into the elevator. The doors closed, cutting off her face, cutting off her voice, cutting off the past. I walked out of the building and into the rain. It was evening now. The city lights were reflecting on the wet pavement. I got into my car. It was quiet. My phone buzzed. A secure notification from the NSID internal server. Subject Operation Glass Harbor. Update. Status threat neutralized. Network dismantled. Casualties prevented. Projected estimate 1,000 plus. I stared at the screen. 1,000 people. Soldiers, civilians, families. People who would wake up tomorrow and have breakfast and go to work and never know that they had been saved because a woman in Maryland decided to print a file and then burn her own life down to protect it. That was the job. It was a silent profession. There were no parades. There was only the knowledge that you had held the line. I put the phone down on the passenger seat. I looked at the empty seat next to me. I was alone. I would go home to an empty apartment. I would eat dinner alone. I would wake up alone. But as I put the car in gear and pulled out into the traffic, merging into the stream of red taillights, I realized something. I was free. I had paid the ransom. The price was high. It cost me a mother, a father, and a brother. But I had bought back my name. I had bought back my life. This was the only revenge that the real world allowed. You don't get to burn their houses down. You don't get to destroy them with a snap of your fingers. You just let the truth do the work. And then, you drive away. Thank you so much for listening to the story of Noelle Harmon on Emma Revenge Stories. If this story gave you chills, please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I love seeing our community grow from all corners of the world. Don't forget to like this video, hit that subscribe button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need to know that sometimes the best revenge is simply telling the truth.